Elle will never forget the day my world crumbled. It started like any other mundane Tuesday, filled with work emails, Jason's half-hearted attempts at homework, and the familiar hum of a coffee maker in the background. Nothing seemed off. Nothing warned me of the storm brewing in the distance. If I'd known, maybe I would have done something differently, though in hindsight I doubt it. Some disasters are inevitable. I was sitting in the living room, scrolling through bills on my laptop, when the notification popped up. Your balance has fallen below the minimum threshold. That was odd. The college fund had more than enough in it. 6 years of careful saving for Jason's future. Laura and I had both agreed it was untouchable. It wasn't a conversation we needed to revisit because we both knew how much it meant. Or so I thought. I logged into the account expecting to see some sort of mistake. Maybe a glitch. Banks mess up all the time, right? But no. The truth hit me like a freight train. The account was empty. Not low balance, empty, zero. No transactions in sight. I stared at the screen, the numbers burning into my eyes, hoping, praying it was a joke. But it wasn't. Laura? I called, my voice shaky. No response. Laura? I tried again, louder this time. But the silence that answered was deafening. She wasn't home. That's when the sinking realization crept in. Laura had been acting strange for weeks. A little distant, a little too dressed up for her errands, brushing off questions about where she was going with vague excuses. I chalked it up to stress, life, whatever. Never once had I thought. I grabbed my phone and dialed her number. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. My heart was pounding, each beat like a drum thudding in my chest. Jason wandered into the room, munching on an apple, oblivious to the chaos unraveling before him. "Where's Mom?" I asked, trying to sound calm for his sake. He shrugged, taking another bite. "She said she had to go somewhere." Somewhere. The word felt like a dagger twisting in my gut. My hands were shaking as I opened our joint credit card account. Maybe I didn't want to see what I already suspected, but I couldn't stop myself. And there it was. Transaction after transaction. Flights, luxury hotels, high-end restaurants. My wife was halfway across the country, living it up on money meant for our son's future. I didn't want Jason to see me fall apart, but it was hard. My mind raced with questions. How could she do this? How could she take from our son? From the one person who had nothing to do with our issues. Sure, we'd been arguing lately. Sure, things hadn't been perfect. But this was unforgivable. Jason must have noticed something on my face, because he came over and put a hand on my shoulder. "Dad, it's fine," he said with a smile that was too calm, too knowing. "I fixed everything." At the time, I thought he was just trying to make me feel better. Kids don't understand the weight of betrayal, the depth of loss. They see things in black and white, good guys and bad guys, problems and solutions. I wanted to believe his words were innocent, but even then, something about his tone felt off, like he knew more than he was letting on. I didn't have the energy to press him. My focus was on Laura. I tried calling again, but it was useless. It wasn't until later that night, when I checked the closet and saw her suitcase was missing, that the truth hit me in full force. She wasn't coming back. She had emptied the account, packed her bags, and walked out on her family. On me. On Jason. The anger came in waves, each one more intense than the last. I wasn't just furious at her. I was furious at myself. How could I have missed the signs? How could I have let this happen right under my nose? Every transaction, every lie, played on repeat in my mind like a cruel movie I couldn't turn off. Jason kept quiet most of the evening, watching me with that same calm expression. When he finally went to bed, I sat alone in the dark, replaying the last few months, trying to find answers. But there weren't any. Just a gaping hole where trust used to be, and a betrayal so deep it threatened to swallow me whole. I'd like to say I found some clarity that night, some resolve to move forward, but I didn't. All I found was the cold, bitter truth. The woman I loved had chosen herself over her family, and there was no coming back from that. What I didn't know, as I sat there drowning in my grief, was that Jason had already started working on a solution, one I couldn't have imagined in my wildest dreams. The days following Laura's betrayal were a blur. I was barely functional, running on autopilot, consumed by anger, confusion, and heartbreak. But Jason was unshaken. If anything, he was eerily composed for a 10-year-old whose mother had just abandoned him. He still went to school, still did his homework, still played with his Legos like nothing had changed. At first, I chalked it up to shock. Kids process trauma differently, right? But the truth was, Jason wasn't ignoring the situation. He was working on it. Started small. I'd catch him typing furiously on his tablet, his face scrunched up in concentration. He'd glance at me and quickly minimize the screen, brushing it off with a casual, "Just homework, Dad." I didn't think much of it at the time. After all, he'd always been a whiz with technology. Coding, gaming, whatever it was his thing. But then there were the whispered phone calls. "Who are you talking to?" I asked one evening, catching him in the kitchen with the phone pressed to his ear. He looked startled, like a deer caught in headlights. Nobody," he said, shoving the phone into his pocket and hurrying out of the room. I didn't press him. I figured he was talking to a friend, or even a counselor from school. Everyone handles grief differently, I told myself. Maybe this was his way of coping. Then there was the garage. Jason started spending hours in there, tinkering with tools and wires. At first, I didn't pay much attention. I assumed he was working on one of his little engineering projects. He'd always been good at building things. Robots, model planes, stuff like that. But one night, curiosity got the better of me. I wandered into the garage to see what he was up to, and what I found stopped me cold. There was a whiteboard covered in diagrams, equations, and flowcharts. It looked like something out of a spy movie. Next to it was a laptop with lines of code scrolling across the screen. Jason was sitting at the workbench, soldering something that looked suspiciously like a listening device. When he saw me, he jumped up, trying to block the whiteboard with his small frame. "What's all this?" I asked, genuinely baffled. "Nothing, Dad. Just a project for school," he said too quickly, too defensively. I raised an eyebrow. "A school project? Since when does 4th grade require surveillance equipment?" Jason's face turned red, and for a moment, I thought he might actually confess. But then he just shrugged and muttered, "You wouldn't get it," before packing up his tools and heading back inside. I stood there, staring at the whiteboard, my head spinning. Whatever Jason was working on, it wasn't for school, and it wasn't just a hobby. As the days went on, the strange behavior only escalated. Jason started asking oddly specific questions about Laura's finances. Did she have other accounts? Did I know her passwords? Did she ever talk about offshore investments? At first, I thought he was just being curious, but then I realized he was gathering information. "Why do you want to know all this?" I asked one evening. Jason shrugged, not looking up from his tablet. "No reason. Just wondering." "Jason," I said, my voice firm, "this isn't normal. If something's bothering you, you need to tell me." He finally looked up, his expression unreadable. "I told you, Dad. I'm fixing it. You'll see." That night I couldn't sleep. Jason's words kept echoing in my mind. Fixing it. What could he possibly mean by that? I thought about confronting him, demanding answers, but something held me back. Maybe it was exhaustion, or maybe it was a small, irrational part of me that trusted him, trusted that he really did know what he was doing. The next morning, I found him in the kitchen, typing away on his laptop. He didn't even notice me standing there, watching him. His fingers flew across the keyboard with a kind of confidence that didn't belong to a 10-year-old. "Jason," I said softly, and he froze. "Yeah, Dad." I wanted to ask him what he was doing, what he was planning, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I just said, "Breakfast is ready," and walked away. Looking back, I should have pressed him harder. I should have demanded to know what he was up to, but part of me didn't want to know. Part of me was afraid of what I might find out. Over the next few days, Jason's behavior became more secretive. He stopped leaving his tablet unattended. He locked the garage whenever he was working. He even started covering the whiteboard with a sheet when he wasn't using it. And then, just as I was starting to convince myself that it was all harmless, Laura called. It was late afternoon when my phone rang. I was standing by the kitchen sink, staring blankly out the window, still trying to piece my life back together. Jason was in the living room, playing on his tablet, completely immersed as usual. I glanced at the caller ID and froze. Laura. My first instinct was to let it ring. Why should I answer? What could she possibly say to justify what she'd done? But curiosity got the better of me, and against my better judgment, I picked up. What do you want? My voice was cold, sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. Alex, she cried, her voice frantic and trembling. Oh my God. Alex, you have to help me. Help her? The audacity of her request made my blood boil. Help you? I spat. You emptied our son's college fund and ran off with your boyfriend. Why on earth would I help you? Alex, please, just listen to me, she begged, her voice cracking. Something's gone wrong. Everything's gone wrong. I leaned against the counter, gripping the edge to steady myself. What are you talking about? It's Damien, she said, almost sobbing now. He's gone. Just disappeared. All his accounts are frozen and so are mine. I can't access anything, Alex. Nothing. And now the police are looking for me. Her words hit me like a slap, but it wasn't sympathy I felt. It was satisfaction. Cold, heartless satisfaction. I wanted to ask her how it felt to be stranded, powerless, abandoned, the way she left Jason and me. But I stayed silent, letting her dig her own grave. Alex, please, she continued, her desperation growing. I don't know what's happening. I don't know who did this, but I need your help. I'm stuck in Miami with no money, no ID, nothing. Damien said he'd take care of everything, and now he's just gone. Sounds like a real stand-up guy, I said dryly, unable to resist the jab. She didn't even acknowledge it, too consumed by her panic. I swear, Alex, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. You just what, Laura? I snapped, my anger finally boiling over. You just stole from your own son? You just walked out on your family for some guy who clearly doesn't give a damn about you? Is that what you didn't mean to happen? There was a long pause on the other end, broken only by the sound of her shaky breathing. I made a mistake, she whispered. A mistake. I barked out a bitter laugh. You don't get to call this a mistake, Laura. You made a choice. A selfish, cruel choice, and now you're paying for it. Alex, please, she said again, her voice barely audible. I have nothing. I don't know what to do. I need you. I opened my mouth to reply, but before I could, Jason appeared in the doorway, holding his tablet. Who's on the phone? He asked, his tone casual as if this were any other day. I covered the receiver and whispered, It's your mom. Jason's face darkened for a brief moment, but then that same calm, knowing smile spread across his lips. Put it on speaker, he said. Jason, trust me, Dad. Put it on speaker. Something in his tone made me hesitate. This wasn't a request. It was a command. I didn't understand why, but I found myself obeying. I pressed the speaker button and set the phone down on the counter. Laura, I said, my voice hardening. You're on speaker now. Jason's here. There was a sharp intake of breath on her end. Jason, she said, her voice softening. Sweetheart, it's Mommy. Save it. Jason interrupted, his tone cold and emotionless. I don't want to hear it. Jason, please, she pleaded. I know I hurt you. I know I made a mistake. But you didn't just make a mistake, he said, cutting her off again. You betrayed us. You stole my future, and now you're calling us because you want our help. That's pathetic. I stared at him, stunned. This wasn't the voice of a 10-year-old. This was the voice of someone older, someone wiser, someone darker. Jason, Laura whispered, her voice breaking. I'm your mother. I love you. I didn't mean. You don't love me, he said bluntly. If you did, you wouldn't have left. You wouldn't have stolen from me. You chose Damien over us, and now you're paying the price. I don't feel sorry for you. You deserve this. Jason, please, she sobbed. I'm begging you. Please help me. He smiled then, a chilling, confident smile that sent a shiver down my spine. Don't worry, Mom, he said. I already did. What she asked, her voice laced with confusion. Let's just say, he replied, his tone almost gleeful. Damien won't be around to hurt anyone anymore. And neither will you. The line went dead. I stood there staring at Jason, my mind racing. What did you do? I whispered. He looked up at me, his eyes calm, almost proud. I told you, Dad, he said. I fixed everything. When Jason uttered those words, I fixed everything. I didn't know whether to feel proud, horrified, or completely confused. My 10-year-old son, standing there with that unnerving calmness, had just silenced his panicking mother with a cryptic remark that left me more unsettled than ever. My mind raced with possibilities, each one more absurd than the last. What could he have done? Jason, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. What do you mean you fixed everything? What did you do? He shrugged casually, as if we were discussing his math homework. It's like I said, Dad. Mom and Damien can't hurt us anymore. I felt my stomach twist into a knot. Jason, this isn't a game. You need to tell me exactly what you've done. He sighed, like a parent indulging a child's endless questions, and motioned for me to follow him into the living room. Okay, fine. I'll show you. We sat down on the couch and he opened his tablet. The screen lit up with a dizzying array of charts, bank statements, and what looked like coding scripts. My pulse quickened as he started explaining, his voice calm and methodical as if he were presenting a science project. Remember how Mom drained my college fund? He began. Well, I figured if she could take the money, I could take it back. I stared at him speechless as he pulled up a series of bank transactions. Sure enough, the $50,000 Laura had stolen was back in the account. Not just sitting there, but reorganized and invested in a way that made my head spin. How did you? I stammered. Easy, he said, as if breaking into bank accounts was as simple as tying his shoes. Mom wasn't exactly careful with her passwords. I just used the one she saved on her phone to access her accounts. Damien too. He wasn't any smarter. Once I was in, I transferred the money back to where it belongs. That's illegal, I said, though my voice lacked conviction. He shrugged again. So is stealing from your kid. I couldn't argue with that, but my unease deepened as he continued scrolling. The bank transfers were just the beginning. Jason had done more, much more. Damien had a bunch of accounts in his name, Jason said, pointing to the screen. Turns out he's been scamming people for years. Fake investments, shell companies, stuff like that. I reported everything to the authorities. Gave them all the evidence they need to lock him up for good. You reported him? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Yep. I even made sure the trail led back to Mom too, he added with a smirk that chilled me to the bone. She helped him spend the money, so technically she's part of the scam now. The police are watching her too. Jason, do you understand what you've done? I said, my voice rising. This isn't just about getting the money back. You've put your mother in serious trouble. She put herself in trouble. He shot back, his tone sharper now. She chose Damien over us. She chose herself over us. Why should I feel sorry for her? I didn't know how to respond. He was right, of course. Laura had betrayed us in the worst possible way. But hearing those words come from my son, delivered with such icy detachment, made my chest ache. This wasn't just a 10-year-old taking a stand. This was something darker. And Damien? I asked, dreading the answer. What do you mean he won't be around anymore? Jason grinned. Oh, don't worry. He's fine for now. He just doesn't have any money or anywhere to hide. The authorities froze all his accounts. By the time they find him, he'll be broke and in jail. The casual way he said it, as if destroying a man's life was no different than squashing a bug, sent a shiver down my spine. Jason, I said, choosing my words carefully. Why didn't you tell me about this before? Why didn't you let me handle it? He looked up at me, his expression suddenly softer. Because I knew you wouldn't do anything. You just let her get away with it because you're too nice. Someone had to stop her, Dad. Someone had to protect us. I felt like the ground had shifted beneath me. My son, my sweet, brilliant boy, had taken it upon himself to not just fix our situation, but to exact revenge in a way I couldn't have dreamed of. I didn't know whether to be proud of his resourcefulness or terrified of what it meant. Jason, I said after a long pause, I'm not sure this is the right way to handle things. He tilted his head, his calm demeanor never wavering. Maybe not, but it worked. I leaned back on the couch, running a hand through my hair. I didn't know what to say, what to feel. My son had done what I couldn't, taken control of a hopeless situation and turned it on its head. But at what cost? Jason closed his tablet and looked at me with that same unnerving confidence. Don't worry, Dad, he said. Everything's going to be okay now. But as I sat there staring at him, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were far from okay. I didn't sleep much after Jason's revelation. How could I? The sheer magnitude of what he'd done kept replaying in my mind like a movie stuck on an endless loop. My son, a 10-year-old, had engineered a scheme so intricate, so devastating that it left a grown man and woman completely ruined. And the worst part? He didn't seem to feel the slightest shred of guilt about it. I told myself I'd talk to him in the morning, but life had other plans. The phone rang again. Laura. My first instinct was to ignore it. After all, what could she possibly say that would change anything? But a small, masochistic part of me wanted to hear her squirm. So I answered. What now, Laura? I said, my tone colder than ice. Her voice was barely recognizable, weak and hoarse, like someone who hadn't slept in days. Alex, she began, but her words faltered. I don't have time for your sob stories, I snapped. If you're calling to beg for money or forgiveness, you're wasting your breath. I don't want your money, she said quietly. I don't know what I want. That caught me off guard. For the first time since this nightmare began, there was no arrogance in her tone, no entitlement, just raw, unfiltered defeat. Then why are you calling? I demanded. I'm in trouble, Alex, she admitted. Real trouble. You don't say, I replied sarcastically. She ignored my sarcasm. The police, they're investigating me. They think I was part of Damien's scams. Weren't you? I asked, letting the accusation hang in the air. She hesitated. I didn't know what he was doing at first, she said, her voice trembling. But by the time I figured it out, it was too late. I was already tied to everything. And now they're freezing my accounts, seizing my assets. I have nothing, Alex. Nothing. That makes two of us. I shot back. Or did you forget that you wiped out Jason's college fund to finance your little adventure? I was stupid, she admitted, her voice breaking. I thought Damien loved me. I thought he'd take care of me. I let out a bitter laugh. And how's that working out for you? She didn't respond. The silence on the other end spoke volumes. Why are you calling me, Laura? I asked again, this time softer, though no less firm. Because you're all I have left, she said quietly. You and Jason. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Not because they moved me, no, far from it, but because of how delusional they were. You don't have us, I said firmly. You lost us the moment you chose Damien over your family. Alex, please, she begged, her voice cracking. I made a mistake. I know I messed up, but I'm still Jason's mother. I need a second chance. A second chance? I repeated incredulously. Laura, this isn't some minor slip-up. You stole from your own child. You abandoned him for a man you barely knew. And now that your perfect little fantasy has come crashing down, you want to come crawling back? No, absolutely not. Her sobs filled the line, but I didn't waver. Couldn't. Alex, I don't have anywhere else to go, she said, desperation seeping into every word. That's not my problem, I replied coldly. What about Jason? She asked, her voice trembling. Doesn't he deserve to have his mother in his life? Jason doesn't need you, I said bluntly. He's done more for this family in the past 2 weeks than you ever have. And he's done it without you. We don't need you, Laura. Not anymore. The line went silent for a moment. I thought she'd hung up, but then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. So that's it? She asked. You're just going to turn your back on me? I let out a bitter laugh. You turned your back on us first. And now you're reaping what you sow. She didn't respond. I heard her breathing, shaky and uneven, and then the call disconnected. When I turned around, Jason was standing in the doorway, watching me with that same calm expression he always wore. Was that Mom? He asked. I nodded. What did she want? To come back, I said simply. Jason didn't flinch. Did you tell her no? I did. He nodded, satisfied. Good. She doesn't deserve to come back. I wanted to tell him that it wasn't that simple, that forgiveness was supposed to be part of the process. But looking at him, so composed, so sure, I couldn't bring myself to say the words. Maybe he was right. Maybe some things really were unforgivable. In the days that followed, I couldn't stop replaying everything Jason had done, everything he had orchestrated. It was impossible not to marvel at his brilliance. A 10-year-old had managed to outwit grown adults, dismantle a criminal scheme, and save his family from ruin, all while keeping an unnerving level of composure. It was impressive, no doubt about it, but it was also terrifying. Jason didn't act like a normal child. He didn't respond to situations with fear or hesitation. Instead, he calculated, strategized, and executed with precision. It was as if every decision he made was part of a grand chess game only he could see. And while I couldn't deny the effectiveness of his actions, I couldn't ignore the coldness behind them. One evening, as I sat on the couch staring at the cardboard over the window, Jason came into the room. He had that same calm, confident expression he always wore, but there was something different about his eyes, something heavier. Dad, he said, sitting down beside me. Are you mad at me? The question caught me off guard. Mad at you? For what? For everything I did, he said simply. For going after Mom and Damien. For not telling you. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. How could I even begin to answer that? Jason, I started carefully. What you did. It's not something a 10-year-old should ever have to do. It's not something anyone should have to do. But I did it, he said, his tone unflinching. And it worked. It did, I admitted. But it's not just about whether it worked. It's about what it means. He frowned. What do you mean? I hesitated, searching for the right words. Jason, the way you handled things. It wasn't normal. It wasn't healthy. You shouldn't have to think like that, to act like that. You're just a kid. His expression didn't change. I did what needed to be done. If I hadn't, who would have stopped them? I wanted to argue, to tell him it wasn't his responsibility, that I should have been the one to handle it, but deep down I knew he was right. I had been paralyzed by anger and grief, too caught up in my own pain to act. Jason had stepped in because I hadn't, and that realization cut deeper than anything else. You're smart, Jason, I said after a long pause. Smarter than I'll ever be. But you're also my son, and it's my job to protect you, not the other way around. He looked at me then, his eyes searching mine. But what if you can't? He asked softly. What if it's up to me? I didn't have an answer. How could I, when the evidence was staring me in the face? Jason had protected us. He had saved us. But at what cost? In the weeks that followed, life slowly began to return to normal. Or at least as normal as it could be. Damien was behind bars and Laura had gone silent, likely too caught up in her own legal troubles to bother us anymore. The house was quiet, peaceful even, but that peace felt fragile, like a thin sheet of glass, ready to shatter at the slightest touch. One afternoon, I found Jason in the garage, tinkering with a new project. It was a drone, sleek and meticulously built, with wires and circuits laid out in perfect order. He looked up when I entered, offering a small smile. Hey, Dad, he said. What's up? I leaned against the doorway, watching him work. You're always building something, aren't you? He shrugged. I like it. It keeps my mind busy. That's a good thing, I said carefully. But Jason, you don't always have to be fixing things. Sometimes it's okay to let things just be. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he focused on soldering a tiny wire, his hands steady and precise. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. "I don't know how to do that." "What do you mean?" He set down the soldering iron and looked at me, his expression serious. "I don't know how to just let things be. If something's broken, I have to fix it. If there's a problem, I have to solve it. It's just how I think." I wanted to tell him that he didn't have to carry that burden, that it wasn't his responsibility to fix everything. But I knew better. Jason wasn't like other kids. He saw the world differently, and no amount of reassurance from me would change that. "You've got a gift, Jason," I said finally. "But it's also a responsibility. You're going to have to decide how to use it and who to trust with it." He nodded, his eyes thoughtful. "I know." I watched him for a moment longer, my chest tight with a mixture of pride and worry. Jason was brilliant, no question about it, but brilliance could be a double-edged sword. It could build or destroy, heal or hurt, and I could only hope that as he grew, he would choose to build. That night, as I lay in bed, I thought about Laura's final words to me. "You raised a son who doesn't just survive, he conquers. But be careful, Alex. One day, his heart might be too cold to save." I didn't want to believe her, but the thought lingered. Jason was more than just a survivor. He was a force to be reckoned with, and while I was proud of him, I couldn't shake the fear that his brilliance, unchecked, might one day lead him down a path I couldn't follow. For now, though, we had peace, and I was determined to protect it for both our sakes.